Julio was just a boy of 14 years old, but he didn't have a home, nor a bed, and most days he didn't even have enough food. Living on the streets of the noisy, bustling city of Abuja, he wore the same clothes every day, torn, dirty, and old. His feet were always bare. To survive, Julio scavenged for bottles and scrap metal from dustbins, placing them into a large sack in hopes of selling them for a few coins. Sometimes luck was on his side. A kind man would give him 5 naira. Other times, people shouted at him, "Go away! You're dirty! You're spoiling the market." But Julio never gave up, even when his stomach growled loudly or he hadn't eaten all day. That morning, the sun rose hot and bright. Julio woke early from the cold pavement where he had slept. His back ached, his lips were dry, and his belly had been empty since the day before. He grabbed his old sack, the one used for collecting bottles and scrap, and started to walk slowly, his legs feeling weak. Julio wandered through the dusty streets, searching gutters and rubbish heaps. He found 2 crush bottles, a bent spoon, and a few metal cans. Smiling faintly, he dropped them into his sack, whispering, "Maybe today I'll get enough coins to buy food." Soon, he arrived at the market, where noise filled the air, women shouting prices, men pushing carts, children running with pieces of bread. Julio approached the first stall and softly asked, "Andy, please, do you have some food you're not using?" The woman turned swiftly. "Go away! You think I cook for beggars?" she snapped. Quietly, he stepped back and moved to the next woman selling tomatoes. "A little bread. Andy, even the crumbs?" he asked. She ignored him completely, as if he didn't exist. Julio moved from stall to stall. No one looked at him. Some waved him off angrily. Others simply turned away. His stomach ached. His eyes burned. But he didn't cry. Then he saw a small group of boys eating roasted corn near a banana stand. One boy accidentally dropped a piece of food on the ground and didn't pick it up. Julio waited until they walked away, then slowly bent down, picked up the piece, and wiped the dust off with his shirt. He didn't care what it was. His belly needed something. But before he could eat, a dog dashed past and snatched it from his hand. Julio sat silently beneath a wooden stall, arms wrapped around his knees, trying to stay calm. "Maybe the trash will feed me today," he whispered softly. Rising again, he made his way behind a nearby restaurant where food waste was discarded daily. The smell was strong, the flies numerous. But to Julio, it was hope. He carefully rummaged through the trash, lifting lids and checking plates. Finally, he found a small bowl of rice and beans, still somewhat clean, not spoiled. His heart leapt. "Thank you, God," he whispered. He rinsed the bowl quickly with water from a leaking pipe, sat beneath a small tree beside the dumpster, placed his sack down, unwrapped the rice with trembling hands, and smiled. It was his first meal in 2 days. He lifted a spoonful to his mouth, but suddenly heard a sound behind the dumpster, a soft thud, like someone had fallen. Looking up, he saw a woman lying on the ground, her clothes dusty, face streaked with sweat. She clutched her stomach. Pregnant. Julio dropped the spoon, his heart pounding fast. He stood and hurried to her. Her eyes were closed, hands trembling, her belly swollen. She looked as if she hadn't eaten in days. "Madam, are you okay?" Julio asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't answer. He looked around. The market was still busy just across the road. But no one was paying attention. No one saw her fall. No one cared. Julio took her cold hand. His gaze fell on the rice plate in his hand, the only food he had. He looked back at her, lips dry, stomach tight and heavy. The baby inside her wasn't moving. He made a decision. Gently, Julio brought the food close to her mouth. He tore a piece of nylon and carefully fed her small bits of rice with his fingers. "Please eat." "Madam, just a little. You need to eat," he whispered softly. Her eyes opened slowly. Tears traced down her cheeks. She looked at Julio, dusty, exhausted, sweaty, and saw the kindness in his eyes and the food in his hand. "Why? Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Julio gave a small smile. "Because I know what hunger feels like. Nobody helped me yesterday. But I don't want your baby to suffer." The woman cried, eating more slowly. Painfully, Julio helped her sit up, wiping her forehead with the edge of his shirt. Soon, she began to breathe better, her shaking subsiding. After a few minutes, she spoke again. "My name is Natasha." Julio nodded. "I'm Julio." She looked at him and managed a weak smile. "Julio, you have a good heart. I didn't think anyone still cared." She reached into her small bag and pulled out a folded, bent but clean card. "Take this. It's my business card. One day, if you need help, find me." Julio took the card, glanced at it. He couldn't read all the words, but he saw her name, Natasha, helping her to her feet. She stood slowly, one hand on her belly, the other holding his arm. "Thank you, Julio," she said softly, then slowly walked away into the street. Julio watched her until she disappeared into the crowd. His gaze fell to the empty plate. No food left. His stomach was still empty, but his heart felt full. "Maybe today I did something right," he whispered. He picked up his sack and returned to the street, back to his life, back to hunger, back to survival. But this time, he had a card in his pocket and hope in his heart. Now, think, before that day in the market, before Natasha was weak and lying beside the trash, she was someone else entirely. Once, she was the wife of one of Abuja's wealthiest men. Her husband, Mr. Ina, was a powerful businessman owning buildings, cars, and companies. When they entered a room, people stood. When they spoke, others listened. But money does not always bring peace. At first, their love was strong, traveling, laughing, dreaming together. But gradually, everything changed. Ina became too busy, too cold, too proud. One day, Natasha uncovered a truth that shattered her. He had another woman, a secret family in another city. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "I'm a man of many needs. If you don't like it, leave." Her heart broke. She had loved him with all she had, built her life around him. Now, he treated her as if she meant nothing. She was already 2 months pregnant when she left the mansion, clutching a handbag in her tears. No driver, no money, no protection. Her phone was off, her bank account frozen. She had nothing but the baby inside her. For days, she wandered the streets, trying to stay strong. But one afternoon, hunger hit her hard, and her legs gave way. She collapsed behind a restaurant beside a dumpster. She was no longer Madame Natasha. She was just a tired woman, alone, forgotten, hungry, pregnant. Many years later, Julio was no longer a little boy. He was now a young man, taller, with a sharper face, but still living on the streets. He had grown, yet his life hadn't changed much. He still carried a sack, still scavenged scrap metal and bottles, still slept under the same bridge on cold nights. Some days were better. He found enough to buy bread and beans other days. His stomach remained empty from dawn to dusk. But Julio never became bitter. He still smiled at children, shared what little he had with street dogs, and deep in his pocket, he kept an old, bent business card. Natasha's name was still written on it. He had never used it. He didn't even know if she was alive, but that card somehow gave him hope. One afternoon, the sun was blazing, the streets bustling. Julio was crossing the road with his sack of bottles, eyeing scrap metal across the street, eager to collect it before others did. He looked left, then right. The road appeared clear. Carefully, he stepped out. Suddenly, a screech of tires, a car speeding from the corner. Before Julio could jump back, it struck him. Screams erupted. His sack flew into the air. Bottles shattered on the ground. Julio lay motionless on the hot asphalt, blood slowly spreading beside him. A crowd gathered. "He's not moving." "Call the hospital. That's the bottle boy who roams around here." A taxi rushed him to St. Grace Hospital. He was unconscious, his head bleeding, his chest struggling to rise. Doctors hurried in, and then a nurse stepped into the room. Her soft eyes, calm hands, and her own history. Her eyes widened in shock as she looked at Julio's face. Stepping closer, she whispered in a trembling voice, "Julio." She turned to the doctor beside her and said urgently, "Please, don't give him to anyone else. I'll take care of him personally." The other doctor nodded silently. Gently, she placed her hand on Julio's chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You fed me when you had nothing," she said softly, "and now I will do everything I can to keep you alive." It was Natasha. Julio lay on the hospital bed, unconscious, with bandages wrapped around his head and chest. Machines beeping softly beside him. A drip was in his arm, and his face looked tired but peaceful. Natasha sat quietly by his side, her white nurse uniform wrinkled from hours of worry. Her eyes were red from crying, yet her heart was steadfast. She gently held his hand, feeling the faint warmth of his skin. "You don't know who I became, Julio," she whispered softly, "but you saved me that day behind the restaurant. I was ready to give up." She remembered everything, the food he'd given her, the words he'd spoken, the way he had walked away with nothing left for himself. "You gave me your only meal, Julio, and now, I promise, I'll give you a second chance at life." Days passed. Every morning, Natasha carefully cleaned his wounds, fed him through a tube, and spoke to him even when he didn't respond. She stayed by his side during the long nights when others had gone home. The doctors observed her care with quiet admiration. One of them remarked softly, "He must mean something very special to you." Natasha smiled gently and replied, "He's not my brother, nor my husband, but he's the reason I'm alive today." On the fifth morning, just as dawn was breaking, Natasha was wiping Julio's face with a damp cloth. Suddenly, his fingers twitched. Her breath caught. "Julio," she whispered, leaning closer. His eyes fluttered open slowly. He blinked, confused. Where am I?" he asked softly. Tears filled Natasha's eyes as she smiled through her tears. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital. And you're not alone." Julio looked at her at first. He didn't recognize her. But then, something in her eyes sparked a faint memory. I know you," he whispered. You were pregnant behind the dumpster?" She nodded gently. "Yes, and you gave me food when I had nothing." His face crumpled with emotion. "I never forgot you. Julio," she whispered. Tears streamed down his face for the first time in years. Someone had cared for him again. He tried to sit up, but she gently held him back. "Just rest," she said softly. "Let me take care of everything." That day marked the beginning of his slow recovery. Julio stayed in the hospital for weeks. Natasha was always there, bringing him hot soup, clean clothes, and her gentle presence. Each day, he healed not just physically but emotionally. The doctors observed her dedication and commented, "He must be someone very important to you." She simply replied, "He's the reason I'm still here." Finally, the doctor announced, "Julio, you're strong enough to go home." Julio hesitated, unsure, but Where will I go? He asked quietly, gazing at his thin hands. He had no home, no family, no money, nothing. Natasha arrived with a small bag of food and a warm smile. You don't have to worry, she said softly. You're coming with me. Julio looked up, confused. To where? He asked. She gently took his hand. To my home, she replied. That evening, Natasha helped Julio into a small taxi. They passed busy roads, towering buildings, and quiet neighborhoods. Eventually, they reached a cozy, clean apartment. There were flowers by the window, children playing in the courtyard, and an atmosphere of peace. Julio stepped inside carefully, never having lived in a place like this. The neat furniture, a small dining table, and the smell of warm rice in the kitchen made him feel strange but safe. Then, a little girl with big eyes, short curly hair, and a wide smile ran out from the bedroom, hiding behind Natasha. She asked shyly, Mommy, who's that? Natasha knelt down and gently pulled her close. This is Julio, she said softly. A long time ago, before you were born, Julio saved your life. The girl looked at Julio and smiled shyly. Thank you, she whispered, hugging him softly. Julio's hands trembled as he held the child. He looked at Natasha with gratitude. This is the baby from that day, she explained. She nodded. Her name is Zuri. She means beautiful in Swahili. She's alive because of you. Tears welled up in his eyes for the first time in many years. That night, he slept in a bed, under a roof, with food in his stomach and love in the room. Weeks turned into months. Julio stayed with Natasha and little Zuri, helping around the house, going to the market, sharing laughter, eating well, and learning to read and write from Zuri's school books. Natasha saw his efforts and believed in him. One morning, she said, Julio, I spoke to a friend. They run a recycling company. They can give you a job sorting bottles and scrap, doing it the right way. Julio's eyes lit up. A real job, he asked. She smiled warmly. Yes, and it starts next week. Tears of happiness streamed down his face. Thank you. Natasha, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to live. Julio now wakes each morning with purpose. He wears a clean shirt, goes to work, shares meals with Natasha and Zuri at the same table, and no longer sleeps under bridges. He's no longer just a bottle boy. He is Julio, a young man with a future. And so, my dear viewers, sometimes those with nothing give the most, and often, a small act of kindness can come back like a miracle many years later. Never look down on anyone. The person you help today might be the one to save your life tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, comment your thoughts below, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and change lives. Thank you.